our weekly guest here on Wednesdays. Let's bring in Dean whenever we're ready here. And we'll talk a little trends from week one. We talked to Dean last week to preview the season. Dean, how's it going, man?
Good. How you guys doing?
Not bad.
Doing great. I don't think there's a ton of controversy coming out of week one. That seems like a good thing, right?
Yeah, that's always good. We like to in officiating. We like to ramp up. Let's get our controversies a little bit later, like everybody else. We'll kind of wait a little bit. It's good.
You tend to save them for prime time too, right? So Sunday night football, Monday night football, you got to have your contested catches and crazy stuff.
Always. When I was the head of officiating at the NFL, I would say, look, there's three games that I don't want anything to happen in: Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night. Let it happen 1:00 on Sunday in a game that not a lot of people are watching, but unfortunately everybody's watching all the time.
That's the same strategy Kirk Cousins uses, right? Just don't be on prime time. Just do it at 1:00.
Yeah.
Any notable trends, stats coming out of week one?
Well, I think, the league always looks at game time. And so the average game time compared to week one last year was down. We're at 3 hours, 2 minutes, 58 seconds. So the league is always shooting for that magical 3 hour window. It's not going to happen. We're never going to fit games in under 3 hours or below unless we drastically change the timing rules. But I think they'll look at that. The problem, though, when you look at game time is plays per game. And plays per game, the average number over time has been somewhere around 155 plays per game. That was significantly down in week one, 148 plays per game. And that's kind of what you're right. That's what you're giving. That's what you're selling your fans are football plays. So that number below 150, look, small sample size, but that's troublesome if that continues. Points per game, pretty good, 45.8. That's a healthy number. Your average margin of victory, 10.8. Anytime you can get that close to a one-score game, that's always the goal. But passing yards were down big time, 76 per game, which was down about 20 yards from last year, week one. But the way, and I think we've talked about this, week one, even into week 2 and 3, it feels like extended preseason for everybody because the ones don't play a lot in the preseason. So I think we're going to hopefully see those numbers start to trend upward as we get into the latter portion of the season.
If we go all the way back to the opening game, Baltimore, Kansas City, what did you make of the way that game started with officials really cracking down on Baltimore's offensive line alignment and then not really doing it for the rest of the game? Certainly Kansas City had a couple of plays where, Twitter's awash with people pulling up screenshots of, well, how come this wasn't called? And then, but it didn't really, that was kind of it, right? We made the statement in the first game, and then the rest of the games weren't awash with. This wasn't like a giant push all the way through week one.
Yeah, it did feel aggressive from that crew. This hasn't changed. Formations haven't changed. And if you remember last year, week one, we were talking about they weren't calling Juwan Taylor, the right tackle for the Chiefs, for being too far back. You warn first, when it's close, and then the coach gets the warning, the player gets the warning, and then typically they correct it. To have 3 in the first quarter was a lot. I thought, 5 total in the game. I thought at least 3 of them were probably too technical. And the league, the officiating department, even sent out a memo after that to the officials and to the clubs to say, hey, here's how we're going to officiate this. They didn't want the officials to be too technical. We didn't see it as much. Although for the whole week, there were 22 called, which was high compared to last year, week one, there was only 10. So when you have 22 called in 1 week, that's a high number. I would expect that to come down as well as we head into week 2 and beyond.
I saw some former offensive linemen talking about this. What's the official rule for where the tackle can line up? And somebody highlighted like Ronnie Stanley's posture or the stance may be affecting the official. Do you think that could be an issue for officials to see?
Yeah, it could be if the lineman is too straight up, right? And so the rule is pretty simple. It's the belt line of the snapper. So you just draw a line through the midsection of the snapper, the center, and you've got to be breaking part of that plane. Typically, that's going to be the helmet. And if you're too far back, and officials are going to look for it. Look, third down, third and long, obvious passing situations. The tackle's going to try to cheat a little bit. because you're in pass protection, and make that end go, wider around you. So the officials are looking through that belt line, and then, like I said, I think they're gonna kind of even push that back a little bit because they don't want to be technical. But yeah, Stanley, if he's more straight up, then he's not catching that belt line, and that could certainly lead to more calls.
You want to talk kickoffs? How did the dynamic kickoff? How did that look to you, or from an officiating sense here in Week 1?
I think it looked good. I think a lot of people, we had this unrealistic expectation of returns. This was never going to lead to 70, 80% returns. It just wasn't going to happen. When you talk about the drive start, if you're giving up an average of the 29, 30-yard line, then a lot of teams are just going to kick it through the end zone, and not risk injury, not risk anything, a big return, and give the opponent the ball in the 30. And I think that's what we saw to some extent. Return rate was 32.5%, which was up from last year. If you think about the entire year last year, it was under 22. And I think the league would be happy. I think the league would be happy with a 30 to 35 return rate. I think that's what they thought they were going to get last year when they added the fair catch rule. And it went down so far below that, so they felt they needed to make a drastic change this year. So, we saw a kickoff return for a touchdown. It's a football play. We're seeing more football plays than we did last year, and I think ultimately that's a good thing. But again, we don't know what the injury data is going to tell us. I think that's going to be a real driver as we get to the end of the season and what they do beyond 2024.
How much of a difference do you think it would have made if they had changed the touchback line? There was the talk that was going to be 5 yards further, and at the last minute they kind of balked on it, because that would have presumably made a significant difference to the volume of kicks that are returned. And how much are they interested in that as a concept? Like, how much do they want a kick return as often as possible?
I think they're definitely interested. It would have. There's no question, if you move the ball out to the 35, then less teams are just going to kick it into the end zone, and then you're going to have more returns. I think, I think the injury data is going to tell us a lot, and whether we go to the 35 for 2025. I think if you don't have a high rate of injury on this play, then I think they consider it. If the injury rate is anywhere near what it was on the traditional kickoff, then I don't think they're gonna want more returns, and so I think that's going to be the real driver. But no question, if you move it out to the 35, less teams are going to be comfortable just kicking it into the end zone, because the 35, I mean, that's significant in terms of field position to start a drive.
I want to follow up on one thing that you said earlier about the passing stats being down, because I put a tweet out this week about it. It was the lowest passing yard total at least since 2010, and last year was second lowest. It was the passing touchdowns just a few years ago were at 61 in Week 1. It was down at 34, 35. This week was the lowest total again since 2010. Do you feel like the NFL wants more? So QBs are running more. That's part of the longer game and shorter plays, right? Do you feel like the NFL at some point is going to want more passing, is going to want, like, hey, go emphasize illegal contact more, or whatever it may have been in the past?
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. When you look at the popularity of the NFL, and it goes back to one of the most significant rules changes, the illegal contact rule change in the mid-'70s. I mean, defenses, they were just mauling receivers off the line, big defensive backs, Mel Blount, those types of guys. And the passing game was just stagnant, and the game wasn't as popular. They opened it up with the illegal contact rule. We saw an explosion of passing in the 80s, and the game is where it is today. So there's no question from an officiating standpoint, yes, you have to look at, are we officiating illegal contact? Are we officiating defensive holding, that contact downfield? And you could see something like that if the competition committee says, hey, the correlation between our fouls called are down in these areas and our passing yards are down, we're going to have to tighten that up. But I think, like you said, there's other factors beyond officiating. Is it more running? Is it the schemes? Is it the first-year quarterbacks? Those types of things. So I think all of it contributes to it, but certainly illegal contact and defensive holding is something the competition committee could emphasize if these numbers stay where they are, which are, like you said, historically low.
So I get the competition committee kind of adapting rules and making adjustments year to year. It makes a lot of sense. Is there a conscious attempt, like during the season, to manipulate the game with officiating? Like, if we notice something is skewing different than it's been the past few years, something's down, something's not as good as it normally is there like an in-season conscious okay, we're going to change the way we officiate this to try and boost this back up because the game has changed this year for some reason?
There can be, sure. You never want to make major changes in season. You want to try to be as consistent as possible. But certainly if it's something related to player safety, you might have to make a correction. But again, if you're not calling certain areas of the game to where the rule book and where the competition committee expects it to be called, then yeah, you can make those corrections. You want to make sure if you are doing those things, you communicate that not only to the officials, but to the club. So everybody's aware of, okay, they're going to call this tighter or whatever it may be. So those things can happen. And again, I would expect the passing yards to go up. But if you look at the last couple of seasons, we are not where we were, like you said, even 5-6 years ago. And that's a big part of the popularity and what makes the game so exciting. So it's definitely something that the league has to continue to look at.
All right, last thing, Dean. Monday Night Football, there was a play I noticed immediately, and I know Peyton Manning noticed immediately, where Jordan Mason, because I tweeted this thing out and people were looking at the receiver motion, and I was like, no, Jordan Mason's moving before the snap out of the backfield, moving forward. I was joking about the CFL motion. Was this just a missed false start, or did the Niners find some kind of edge here?
No, that's a miss. That's a missed call. You can any backfield player, any player that's in the backfield can be in motion, but you can't be going toward the line of scrimmage, right? You can have one player in motion lateral to the line of scrimmage, and he's clearly going forward. So you could call that illegal motion, or if it's quick and abrupt, you shut it down and make it a false start. So it's a foul. I just think the officials missed it. It was so close to the snap, but that's not something. Teams are going to try to gain an advantage, but that's something the officials should look at and make sure that they're not letting teams get away with.
And then really quick, can you explain the rule, the Garrett Wilson play where he stepped out of bounds and his heel hit first and his toe landed out of bounds? Jets fans were complaining about that. What's the official rule on that second foot?
I hate this rule
Sam
so much.
hates it, but
hate it so much.
I know. So it's part of it's a concept, we call it toe heel or heel toe. So if you're taking a normal step, right, and there's no drag, there's no delay, it's just a normal step, then the entire foot has to be in bounds. So if the heel comes down a split second first inbounds, and then in the normal stepping motion, the toes come down out of bounds, that's out of bounds. And that's there for the officials to consistently officiate that play, because in real time, it's going to be impossible. I know we have replay, but not every play goes to replay. Not every play is challenged. So for the on-field officials and the consistency, that's the philosophy, the concept of heel, toe, heel. If the entire foot isn't in bounds, it's out of bounds in that situation.
My take is if you have at any point, if there's a part of your foot down or, elbow, whatever the thing is that's putting you in the end zone, if there's a part of it down at any point with none of it out of bounds, it's in, right? It's like if you can toe drag your way to a touchdown, you should be able to do it backwards, and then when your heel comes down, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, it's the Isaiah Likely play, right? I mean, right. that who would not have wanted? Me and my son were screaming because we're like, Harbaugh's going for two.
Yeah, he's going for
this
two.
is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, and look, if these passing yards don't get to where they should be, maybe they will make that change. But that's the rule right now.
We'll get you on the competition committee, Sam.
That's
they
what
get
we're
the rule
talking,
of cool too. Isaiah Likely was the rule of cool. Cool play, cool 2-point conversion coming up. Just let it stand.
I always say that. Look, I say that the rule of cool is a great way of saying it, because look, if you've got a big offensive lineman doing something cool, I think we had to play a couple, that recovers a fumble and he dives into the end zone, and then they overturned it and put him down short of the goal. I'm like, no, give him the touchdown. Let's go.
Well, that was the Robert Hunt play, right? It's one of the coolest plays in NFL history, and it doesn't count because he can't catch the ball and advance it.
Yeah.
He scored one of the greatest touchdowns in NFL history, and we just have to pretend it didn't happen.
Can't just throw screens to the right guard, Sam.
Because apparently it's against the rules.
Dean, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Always love the insight every week, man.
All right, guys. Take care.
Thanks.
You. We'll get you on the competition committee.
Yeah. I think I'm
cool and the heel toe.
Yeah, I think I'm a voice that's been missing for some time.
Would you get some rugby tackling in there? You'll teach them how to tackle rugby style.
Well, the tackling I don't know what I'd do to change NFL tackling. I mean, I would start thinking about some player safety measures from rugby that we could adapt. Rugby's got very strict tackling rules now.
Leather helmets.
You can't do a lot in terms of tackling.